I used to think nothing was truly dangerous if you were holding a camera. If something went wrong, at least you'd have proof. That was my logic back then. Before Briarwood Ridge. Before I learned that some places don't want to be recorded, only remembered. I run a small exploration channel online. The kind that thrives on abandoned buildings, forgotten places, and the promise that something unsettling might still be lurking inside them. For a while it worked. The numbers climbed just enough to keep me hopeful. Just enough to make me believe I was close to breaking through. But hope is fragile when it's built on algorithms. Over time, views slowed, comments dried up, and every upload felt like shouting into a void. I told myself it was temporary, that all creators hit a wall. Deep down though, I knew the truth. I was running out of places, and worse, I was running out of reasons for people to care. My brother Marcus was the only reason the channel stayed alive as long as it did. He filmed most of the footage, handled audio, and acted as the voice of reason when my ideas leaned too far toward reckless. He wasn't in it for fame. He liked the quiet moments between shots, the history buried in broken walls. We'd grown up exploring together, sneaking into half-collapsed sheds and storm drains, pretending we were somewhere far more important than a dying town. As adults, the channel was just an extension of that. But lately, every shoot ended the same way, with Marcus suggesting we slow down and me insisting we needed to push harder. I started measuring my life in numbers without realizing it. Subscriber counts, watch time, engagement ratios. I checked analytics the way some people check mirrors, searching for reassurance that I still existed in a way that mattered. When I spoke to the camera, I exaggerated my confidence, my humor, my fear, whatever I thought would keep people watching. Off camera, I felt hollow. I told Marcus I was thinking of quitting my job soon, that the channel was almost there. He didn't argue, but he didn't agree either. He just looked at me the way you look at someone standing too close to an edge. By the time the email arrived, I was already primed to accept anything that looked like opportunity. I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that I couldn't afford another forgettable video, another night of pretending disappointment didn't hurt. I needed a location that felt different, dangerous, real. And as I stared at my screen, refreshing my inbox, I had no idea how badly the next message would answer that need. I found the email late at night, buried between spam and comment notifications. The sender's address was a mess of letters and numbers, the kind that looks auto-generated, like it wasn't meant to be replied to. The subject line was short, just 2 words, interesting location. Normally I would have deleted it without opening it, but something about it made me pause. The message itself was brief and awkwardly written, like English wasn't the sender's first language. No greetings, no signature, just a few flat sentences saying they'd been watching my channel for a long time, that they appreciated what I did, and that they wanted me to see something important. At the bottom were a set of coordinates. No explanation, no hype. Somehow that made it feel more personal, like it wasn't sent to hundreds of creators, just me. I copied the coordinates into a map app, fully expecting them to drop somewhere impossible or halfway across the world. Instead, the pin appeared uncomfortably close, 5 miles from where I was sitting, 5 miles from the house we grew up in. The name attached to the area made my stomach tighten, Briarwood Ridge. I hadn't heard it spoken out loud in years, but the memory of it was immediate and unwelcome. I stared at the screen longer than I meant to, waiting for the rational part of my brain to kick in and tell me this was stupid. It didn't. Instead, I called Marcus. I didn't explain much. Just said I'd found a potential spot to film and that it was close. Too close. There was a long pause on the line before he answered, and when he did, his voice sounded careful. Marcus knew the name right away. He reminded me of the stories we'd heard growing up. Kids wandering into the woods and never coming back. Search parties turning up and nothing but broken branches and empty beer cans. Our parents had been relentless about keeping us away from that stretch of forest. There were caves out there, they said. Sinkholes. Places where the ground just opened up. Marcus asked where exactly the coordinates led, and when I told him, he went quiet again. He said he didn't like it. That was his way of saying he really didn't like it. I laughed it off, told him every town has its scare stories and that this was probably nothing more than an overlooked hiking area or an old cave system. Privately, I told myself the same thing. Fear has a way of shrinking when you label it superstition. The more we talked, the easier it became to justify going. It was practically in our backyard. No travel cost, no permits, no elaborate planning. If it turned out to be nothing, we could leave and still spin it into a short video. Plausible deniability, I called it. Marcus wasn't convinced, but he agreed. The way he always did when he saw how set I was. When we hung up, I went back to the email and read it again. This time the words felt different. Less like a suggestion, more like an invitation that assumed I'd already said yes. The excitement I'd felt at first had dulled into something heavier, something that sat low in my chest. Still, I packed my gear and charged the batteries. Whatever waited at Briarwood Ridge, I told myself it was just another location, another story. I didn't realize yet that the unease I felt wasn't fear, it was recognition. We parked where the dirt road finally gave up and turned into nothing more than packed mud and weeds. From there, it was a short walk into the trees. The kind of forest that grows too close together, branches tangling overhead until daylight feels diluted. The ground was littered with signs that we weren't the first ones to wander this way. Crushed beer cans half sunk into the soil. Boot prints hardened into the mud. Scraps of plastic caught in thorns. It should have been reassuring. Proof that people came here and left again. Instead, it felt wrong, like evidence of attempts rather than visits. The deeper we went, the quieter everything became. No birds, no insects, just the soft crunch of our boots and the occasional snap of a twig somewhere out of sight. The cave entrance revealed itself gradually, a dark crescent carved into the side of a low hill, partially hidden by roots and overgrowth. It wasn't on any trail map, and my GPS wavered as we got closer, struggling to hold a signal. The opening looked natural at first glance, but the longer I stared, the more artificial it seemed, too smooth in places, too angular in others. Like someone had started shaping it and then stopped. Marcus hesitated at the threshold, shining his light inside and frowning. He said it felt wrong, unfinished. I told him all caves look like that before you get inside. I didn't believe it, but I needed him to. Inside, the air changed immediately. It was colder, heavier, and smelled faintly of damp stone and rust. The tunnel narrowed faster than I expected, forcing us to crouch, then crawl. Our lights picked out walls that looked carved rather than eroded, grooves running in straight lines before dissolving into rough, broken rock. In some places, the ceiling dipped so low my helmet scraped against it. The space felt incomplete, like a construction site abandoned mid-task. I could imagine tools left behind just out of sight, dust settling over plans that would never be finished. Marcus suggested we turn back, at least scout it properly another day. I shook my head and gestured to the camera. This was exactly the kind of thing people wanted to see. I went first, lowering myself through a tight drop that opened into a slightly wider passage below. It wasn't a long fall, but the landing jarred my knees and sent a dull ache up my spine. I told Marcus it was fine and urged him to follow. He took longer, muttering under his breath as he squeezed through, the sound of his breathing loud in the enclosed space. That was when I noticed something strange. Beneath the noise we were making, shuffling, scraping, whispered curses, there was another sound. A slow, steady inhale and exhale echoing faintly along the stone. At first, I assumed it was one of us, the acoustics playing tricks. I stopped moving to test it. Marcus did too. Our lights froze, beams trembling slightly. The breathing didn't stop. It wasn't loud, and it didn't come from any single direction. It seemed to fold around us as if the cave itself was breathing. Marcus asked if I heard that. His voice tight. I told him it was probably air moving through the tunnels, pressure equalizing, something explainable. Even as I said it, the sound shifted, sinking for a moment with my own breath before falling out of rhythm again. I felt a sudden urge to keep going, to push forward before doubt could take root. I told Marcus we were already here, that turning back now would be a waste. After a long second, he nodded and followed. The breathing faded as we moved deeper, or maybe I just stopped listening. Either way, the cave swallowed us whole, and the light from the entrance vanished behind a bend in the stone. The passage narrowed again before widening into a chamber that felt less like part of a cave, and more like a pause between decisions. The walls smoothed out, the jagged stone giving way to something almost deliberate. That was when my light caught the edge of metal. At first I thought it was a trick of shadow, a vein of darker rock running at the wrong angle. I stepped closer and brushed my hand along the surface. Beneath a thin crust of dirt and mineral buildup was a door handle, cold, unmistakably manufactured. The door itself was set flush into the wall, its outline so perfectly matched to the surrounding stone that it might as well have grown there. Marcus swore under his breath. Nothing about this belonged underground, least of all hidden this carefully. It took effort to pull it open. Rust groaned against unseen hinges, and the sound echoed louder than it should have, as if the cave resented the interruption. When the door finally gave way, the world on the other side felt violently out of place. The rough stone ended abruptly, replaced by smooth concrete and clean angles. A long tunnel stretched out before us, its walls pale and uniform, like a hallway stripped of all personality. The air was drier here, sterile in a way that made my nose itch. I remember laughing, a short, nervous sound, and saying something about secret bunkers or old military projects. Marcus didn't laugh. He just stared, the camera fixed on the impossible transition between cave and corridor. Before we stepped through, Marcus took out a piece of chalk from his pack and marked an arrow on the stone near the door. He said it was habit, something explorers did to avoid getting lost. I agreed, though the tunnel ahead didn't look like it could lead anywhere but forward. Once inside, the door swung shut behind us with a muted thud that felt final. The tunnel didn't branch or split. It curved gently, just enough that we could never see where it ended. As we walked, our footsteps sounded wrong, muffled and delayed, like the sound was lagging behind us. After a few minutes, I glanced back and realized I couldn't see the door anymore. The curve had swallowed it completely. That was when time started behaving strangely. I checked my watch out of habit and frowned. We'd only been walking for a few minutes, but it felt longer, like the tunnel was stretching the moments thin. The distance ahead never seemed to shrink. No matter how far we walked, the end remained just out of sight. Marcus made more chalk marks along the wall, small symbols every few meters. When I looked back again, some of them felt farther apart than they should have been. Others seemed closer, almost overlapping. I told myself it was my eyes playing tricks on me, the uniform walls messing with depth perception. Still, a tightness settled behind my eyes, a dull pressure that wouldn't go away. The camera was the first thing to break the illusion that everything was fine. Marcus paused and tapped the side of it, frowning at the screen. I asked what was wrong, and he said the footage was stuttering. Tiny jumps, frames skipping without any obvious cause. He showed me, and I watched myself on the screen move in sharp, unnatural increments, like time itself was hiccuping. The audio was worse. Our voices warped slightly, stretching at the ends of words before snapping back into place. We kept walking anyway. Stopping felt worse than continuing, like the tunnel wanted momentum. As the curve carried us onward, I had the unsettling thought that we weren't walking through it anymore. We were being drawn in, and whatever waited ahead had already accounted for our arrival. The tunnel eventually opened into a space so large that our lights couldn't reach the far walls. The ceiling rose high above us, disappearing into shadow, and the floor widened into what looked like a central hub. From there, multiple corridors branched off at sharp, deliberate angles. This wasn't a cave anymore, it was a facility. The walls were painted a dull institutional white, now flaking and stained, and the floor was reinforced concrete scored with old track marks like heavy equipment had been dragged through countless times. Everything about it felt designed with purpose, yet stripped of anything that might explain why. I felt a surge of excitement cut through my unease. Places like this were the reason I started filming in the first place. We moved cautiously, passing through rooms that blended medical and military aesthetics in a way that made my skin crawl. Stainless steel tables bolted to the floor sat beneath broken surgical lights. Lockers lined entire walls, their doors dented and hanging open, each marked with faded numbers instead of names. In one room, we found rows of metal bunks stacked 3 high, thin mattresses still resting on the frames. At the foot of every bed was a small sealed box identical down to the scratches on their locks. It looked less like a barracks and more like a dormitory designed by someone who didn't understand comfort. Marcus filmed silently, his earlier sarcasm gone, replaced by a tight focus I recognized as concern. In what might have once been a lobby, we found a large, wall-mounted map. A bold arrow marked "You are here," its paint brighter than anything else around it. The diagram showed multiple levels stacked beneath one another, descending far deeper than I expected. 9 levels in total, each sprawling wider than the last. Rooms were labeled in vague, unsettling terms. Assessment, containment, adjustment, observation. No explanations. No legend. I felt a thrill run through me as I imagined what kind of video this could become. I told Marcus it had to be some decommissioned government project, maybe Cold War era, maybe something experimental that never saw the light of day. He shook his head slowly. Government sites leave paper trails, he said. Warnings, fences. This place felt erased, not abandoned. The longer we stayed, the more that idea took hold. There was no sign of panic or decay you'd expect if people had fled in a hurry. No overturned furniture, no personal belongings left behind in chaos. It was as if everyone had simply stood up one day and walked out, taking only what they were told to take. The air felt stagnant but undisturbed, like it hadn't been breathed in a long time. I tried to frame it all through the lens of content, titles, thumbnails, theories, but the excitement had soured into something else. A creeping certainty that we weren't trespassing on a ruin. We were walking through a space that had been deliberately emptied, preserved just enough to be used again. The stairs down opened onto a level that smelled faintly of antiseptic and rot, an unpleasant blend that lingered in the back of my throat. This floor was unmistakably medical. Gurneys lay tipped on their sides, wheels locked in place as if abandoned mid-task. Cabinets stood open, their contents spilled out and left to decay. Glass vials clouded with residue, syringes rusted at the needle, surgical tools arranged with unsettling neatness. Overhead lights hung broken, their casings cracked but their mounts still firmly anchored, suggesting they hadn't failed naturally. Marcus swept the camera slowly across the rooms while I walked ahead, my footsteps echoing too loudly. I felt like we were intruding somewhere we weren't meant to see, not because it was forbidden, but because it was unfinished business. In a smaller side room, we found shelves lined with physical media, slide trays, film reels, and thick folders stuffed with handwritten notes. The paper had yellowed, but the ink was still sharp, as if preserved intentionally. I picked up one of the slide trays and held it to my light. Inside were dozens of tiny images, each one showing the same thing from different angles: exposed skulls, opened heads, delicate instruments braced against tissue that should never have been seen alive. These weren't autopsies. The eyes in the photos were open, focused on the camera. Marcus asked me what I was looking at, but my mouth felt dry, my tongue heavy. I couldn't find the words yet. I just knew this wasn't documentation. It was observation. As I moved through the slides, a pattern emerged that made my hands start to shake. The subjects weren't individuals. They were pairs. 2 bodies positioned close together, sometimes touching, sometimes connected by wires or braces at the head. Notes in the margins referenced synchronization, alignment, shared response. I felt a sudden pressure build behind my eyes, like something tightening from the inside. The room seemed to tilt, the walls pulling slightly away from me. My breathing grew shallow, uneven. I leaned against the counter, trying to ground myself, but the images kept looping in my mind. Paired subjects, shared responses. I was vaguely aware of Marcus talking, asking if I was okay, but his voice sounded distant, like it was coming through water. I slid down until I was sitting on the floor, my back pressed to the cabinet. My heart raced, then stuttered, then raced again. It wasn't just fear, it was recognition. Memories I hadn't touched in years surfaced without warning. Hospital rooms, the smell of disinfectant, adults speaking in careful half-sentences. I remembered scars I never looked at too closely, questions I stopped asking because the answers made everyone uncomfortable. Marcus crouched beside me, concern etched across his face, and for a moment I almost told him everything I was thinking. Instead, I shook my head and laughed weakly, blaming the stress, the lack of sleep, the atmosphere of the place. I said it was nothing. I needed a minute. Even as I stood and wiped the dust from my hands, denial wrapped around me like armor. I told myself coincidences happen, that patterns appear when you're looking for them, that whatever had been done here had nothing to do with us. Marcus didn't push, but his eyes lingered on me longer than usual, like he could sense the lie even if he didn't understand it. We kept moving deeper into the facility, leaving the slides and notes behind. I didn't look back. I was afraid that if I did, I'd see proof that some part of my life hadn't started in a childhood home or a hospital I could remember. But in this place, beneath the ground where experiments replaced names and survival was mistaken for success, the symbol started appearing so often that I stopped noticing it consciously at first. A simple outline of a hair, pale and almost chalky in color, painted or etched onto walls, doors, even the floors in some places. It wasn't threatening in the way warning signs usually are. No sharp edges, no aggressive posture. Just a hair, frozen mid-step, its long ears swept back as if listening. The more I saw it, the more it felt familiar, like something I'd known once and forgotten. Marcus noticed it too, finally asking if I thought it meant anything. I shrugged and said it was probably a logo, some branding from whoever built the place. Even as I said it, my eyes kept drifting back to the symbol, tracing its shape again and again. It felt less like a warning and more like a marker, quietly telling us we were still on the right path. Beyond the marked doors were rooms designed for watching rather than doing. One-way mirrors stretched across entire walls, their glass dark on our side, reflective only when the light hit it just right. Inside the chambers beyond were single chairs bolted to the floor, angled toward nothing in particular. The rooms were soundproofed, thick padding hidden beneath stained panels, and when I closed one of the doors, the silence inside felt absolute, crushing. I clapped my hands experimentally, and heard nothing at all. It was the kind of silence that made your own heartbeat feel too loud. I imagined someone sitting there for hours, days maybe, knowing they were being watched but never seeing who was on the other side. The thought made my skin crawl. Marcus filmed less here, lowering the camera more often, rubbing his temple as if he had a headache he didn't want to talk about. We found the name in a control room tucked behind one of the mirrored chambers. Faded lettering on a metal plaque read the White Warren Initiative. The words sent a shiver through me that I couldn't explain. Notes scattered across the desk referenced terms I barely understood: cognitive mirroring, neural load sharing, tether stability. One phrase repeated often enough to stand out: consciousness transfer. The idea that a mind could be split, stretched, or shared between bodies wasn't presented as theory here. It was written with the confidence of something tested and refined. Marcus skimmed the pages, his expression growing distant. He stopped commenting altogether, just flipping through documents with mechanical focus. I tried to joke, to lighten the mood, but the words fell flat. The excitement I'd felt earlier had been replaced by a low hum of anticipation that didn't feel like my own. As we moved on, I noticed Marcus lagging behind more often, pausing in doorways, staring at the hair symbols as if they were trying to tell him something. When I called his name, he startled slightly, like I'd pulled him out of a daydream. He said he was fine, just tired. I believed him because I wanted to. Meanwhile, a strange certainty settled over me. I stopped checking the map, stopped questioning which corridor to take. I just knew where to go, felt a gentle pull forward that made turning back seem unthinkable. Every step deeper into the facility felt easier than the last, like gravity was subtly tilted in that direction. I told myself it was curiosity, the thrill of discovery, but deep down I understood something else was guiding me, something that recognized me and was quietly pleased that I'd finally come far enough to listen. We saw the wheelchair at the far end of the corridor, positioned neatly beneath a flickering ceiling panel as if someone had placed it there on purpose. At first glance it looked empty, draped in shadow, its metal frame dulled by age. I felt a strange reluctance to approach it, like stepping closer would finalize something I wasn't ready to acknowledge. Marcus slowed beside me, the camera dipping slightly. As we drew nearer, my head began to throb. Sharp, sudden pain blooming behind my eyes. I winced and pressed my fingers to my temples, expecting it to pass. It didn't. The pain intensified, a crushing pressure that felt synchronized with my heartbeat. I glanced at Marcus and saw the same expression mirrored on his face. His jaw clenched, his breathing uneven. Whatever this was, it wasn't happening to just one of us. The closer we got, the worse it became. My vision blurred at the edges, light stretching into thin streaks. Fear rose in my chest, raw and instinctive, unfiltered by reason. I tried to speak, to suggest we leave, but the words tangled and died in my throat. That was when I heard it. Not through my ears, but somewhere deeper. A voice, faint and fragmented, like a signal struggling to tune itself. It didn't echo in the room. It echoed in my mind. Marcus stiffened beside me, eyes wide, and I knew without asking that he heard it too. The voice repeated a sound that felt like a name, broken into pieces, never quite whole. Each repetition sent another spike of pain through my skull. Images flooded my thoughts without permission. Operating rooms, wires threading into flesh, 2 heartbeats syncing on a monitor. The voice wasn't explaining. It was remembering and pulling us along with it. I understood then what the experiments here were meant to achieve. Not control, not replacement. Something far worse. A single consciousness stretched across multiple bodies, shared thought, shared pain, shared will. The wheelchair wasn't empty. It housed the result of that ambition, what remained when the process was left unfinished. I felt my sense of self thinning, like my thoughts were being gently peeled away and examined. Panic surged, but it wasn't mine alone. Marcus staggered forward suddenly, dropping the camera, his face contorted with agony and fury. He grabbed a chunk of broken concrete from the floor and raised it without hesitation. I shouted his name, lunged for him, but my body didn't respond the way it should have. It felt heavy, delayed, like I was moving through thick liquid. Marcus slammed the concrete down once, then again, screaming through clenched teeth, not in rage but in desperation. I realized with horror that he wasn't choosing this. None of us were. Something else had taken hold, overriding instinct and mercy alike. I watched helplessly as control slipped away, as the boundary between my thoughts and his dissolved. In that moment, I understood the true cost of what lay beneath the facility. Identity wasn't lost here. It was shared until no one involved could tell where one mind ended and another began. I don't remember screaming, but I remember my throat burning afterward. Marcus collapsed in front of me, his body finally going still in a way that left no room for denial. I didn't let myself look for long. The corridor felt like it was closing in, the air thick with a pressure that urged me to move. I turned and ran, not toward the way we'd come, but deeper into the facility. Up felt impossible. Forward was the only direction that didn't make my chest seize. My foot caught on something loose and the ground vanished beneath me. I fell through a mess of broken flooring, pipes, and shattered panels, tumbling into darkness. The impact knocked the breath from my lungs and sent a jolt of pain through my arm, but I stayed conscious. When I tried my light, it was dead. The backup was gone. I was alone in absolute black. I stumbled forward blindly, hands scraping along cold walls, counting steps just to keep from freezing in place. Time stretched and folded in on itself. Minutes felt like hours. My thoughts looped, fractured, slipping away from me as exhaustion set in. At some point, my foot struck something solid and familiar. I knelt and felt plastic beneath my fingers. The camera. Marcus's camera. It shouldn't have been there. I'd left it behind. When I turned it on, the night vision cast the world in sickly green. The walls around me were covered in the pale hair symbol, layered over itself in endless repetition, spiraling and overlapping until the shapes blurred. I'd been walking among them the entire time. Ahead, the corridor opened into a vast drop-off, the remains of what must have been the lowest level. The wheelchair waited there, motionless, framed by darkness. I felt the pressure return, the voice stirring again, pulling at the edges of my thoughts. I backed away, heart pounding, until there was nothing beneath my heel. The last thing I remember was falling and the certainty that this place wasn't done with me yet. I woke up choking on sunlight, my face pressed into damp grass, lungs burning like I'd surfaced from deep water. For a long moment I didn't move. I just lay there, listening to the wind in the trees, trying to understand how it was possible that I could still hear anything at all. When I finally pushed myself up, my body screamed in protest. Every muscle ached. My arm was wrapped in a crude splint I didn't remember making. Around me were crushed beer cans and broken branches scattered just outside the cave entrance at Briarwood Ridge. It was afternoon. Bright, normal. The last thing I remembered was falling into darkness. I was gone for 17 days. That's what they told me later. Search teams had combed the woods for over 2 weeks before calling it off the morning I stumbled onto the road. Marcus never came back. I told the police everything about the tunnel, the facility, the symbols, the experiments. They listened, nodded, wrote things down. Then they took me back to the ridge. We found the cave. We found the crawl space. But the door was gone. Solid stone where it should have been. No markings, no concrete, no tunnel. It was like it had never existed. After that, the questions stopped. My story was filed away under shock, trauma, survivor's guilt, an explanation neat enough to close a case. The nightmares started almost immediately. I'd dream of wide open fields under colorless skies, and somewhere at the edge of my vision, the pale hair would watch me. It never chased me, never spoke. It just waited, patient and still, as if it knew I would eventually follow. I woke every night with the same pressure behind my eyes, the same dull ache in my head that never fully faded. Sometimes when I was half asleep, I thought I could feel someone else thinking alongside me, brushing up against my thoughts like fingers against glass. A week after I got home, I finally emptied the bag I'd carried into the woods. Most of it was junk. Food wrappers, spare batteries, dirt ground into the seams. At the bottom, folded neatly, was a document I didn't recognize. It wasn't handwritten. It was typed, formal, stamped with symbols I now knew too well. It referenced ongoing work, relocated sites, improved methodologies. The White Warren Initiative hadn't ended. It had adapted, changed names, changed locations. The final line thanked me for my unintentional contribution and noted that reassignment was preferable to termination in compatible subjects. I don't know why they let me go, or if they ever really did. Some mornings I wake up convinced that part of me never left that place, that something was copied, transferred, or left behind on purpose. I feel it most when I pass mirrors, when my reflection seems just a fraction of a second out of sync. I haven't uploaded anything since. I can't bring myself to turn on a camera again. Still, some nights I see a black van parked down the street, idling with its lights off. And when the pressure in my head grows too strong to ignore, I wonder if survival was never the goal at all, just delay.